Hey, every day is holiday here with Segway number section 42B.56. All right, today on Every Day is an Holiday, we are going to segue and continuer, comme on a fait déjà tout à l'heure, sur un sujet un peu délicat. Like I just said in French, we're going to segue into a very delicate subject. And I don't mean to offend anybody. There's no offense. I'm not promoting National Socialism in any way, nor do I support the Nazi Party or white supremacists in any way. And I do not intend to glorify this topic. It's a very sensitive subject that I happen to know a lot about. And since we've been talking about Nazis all fucking morning, why the fuck not? Okay, so when my grandmother would address a lot of postal, I think the word of it, not postal currency, so we would exchange things in the mail a lot from Germany, my grandmother and I, care packages, gifts, presents, these sort of things. And when I moved to France, I noticed in the packaging it was always addressed to Frankreich. Frankreich, meaning the Germanic word for France. Just like the Germans, they refer to Germany as Allemand. And the Germans refer to Germany as Deutschland. It's interesting how, for me, living in Europe for so long, I gained an understanding and a depth of knowledge about archaeology, an appreciation for history, unparalleled and unrivaled in my life until that time. I'm in my early 20s, and I'm living in Paris, and I understood what Charlemagne had done to Europe. Essentially, Charlemagne was a Roman emperor, but he was French, and c'est le roi. He was the king. Charlemagne had conquered all of Europe, and to understand the German mentality is to understand what a true warrior, soldier, militaristic culture was like. That basically it was heavily influenced from Viking culture, but really more from the onslaught of every other country surrounding Germany, from its birth in Slovenia, which you can trace back the first mutation of someone ever having blue eyes goes back to the salt mines where my ancestors come from, and that's very also connected into the Alps and Slovenia and Austria, and that very Germanic bloodline. There's actually no such thing as a German DNA. It's Alpine, it's Caucasian, and my seed originated from Egypt and apparently conquered all of Europe and Iceland, to the point where my last name Saltner was a aristocracy in Germany, meaning that my ancestors weren't allowed to drop something on the floor and pick it up themselves. They had 13 people surrounding them to pick things up, test their food for them. They lived in castles and chateaus and had massive farms, and through different kinds of wars, people who were once nobles ended up peasants, but still with the same last name and bloodlines. And Germans were always being fucked with by other countries, so they became very militarized. And my grandfather was in a fraternity. He was an expert at fencing. He was like a champion fencer, and him and his brother, and they had scars on their faces from the swords and shit. And I would go there since a little kid and learn about the history of Germany through a lens that was not Nazi or National Socialist in any way, but through a lens of a scientist who was very upper class, very privileged, who had his whole entire life ripped from underneath him and taken away by the goddamn British Empire, who were fucking Nazi sympathizers and racist, and made all the cotton fields and slavery down south of this country, and so many other fucking problems, you know. So the British, not a huge fan in a lot of ways. I think the royal family now today is much different, but you know, I feel like, you know, a lot of people they don't understand the whole Nazi thing, and I'm gonna break it down. Um, I got to spend a lot of time with older people from Germany, who later in life realized that Hitler was a madman. And they were mesmerized, they were brainwashed, some of them Nazi youth even, into thinking that this guy had the right idea. And they were tricked into thinking that you could say that these beautiful young Jewish girls were dirty like vermin and rats. I mean, how sick and fucking twisted could you be? Then they had criminals running the military and police force like Oscar Dirlewanger, injecting people with strychnine, raping and killing innocent people, women and children, throwing them in gulags and prison camps, much like the Russians did if they spoke of any truth to power. Just like I'm doing right now by outing the Republican Party for supporting the ignorance that has fueled National Socialism. Blaming the immigrants, that's a sick fucking choice, man. No, the immigrants have made this country strong. And you're looking at a first-generation German-American immigrant. I'm born in the United States, but I had a dual nationality citizenship for quite a long time. I had a carte de séjour in France, and been going back forth to Germany. I might as well, actually, I believe I have a right to have because my mother was born in India and was a German citizen, have the German citizenship immediately. And das ist sehr gut, yeah. To be proud to be German. I'm very proud of the best beer, hands down, sorry, comes from Germany. No offense. BMW, Porsche, Bosch, Motorworks, you know, the engines, the German engineering, all that kind of stuff. All the best pharmaceutical drugs that you know, all the state-of-the-art cutting-edge research is done in Germany. And French, and English too, but for chemistry it's predominantly right now French and German. I have been fortunate enough to have recently also met some very prominent scientists and medical researchers who are working on immunotherapy and halting the aging process through the manipulation of telomeres from Germany. And I'm very proud of my culture. But a lot of people were tricked and duped into thinking something that wasn't factual, not based on science, because they were afraid and they were broke. And that history repeating itself pattern is happening right before our eyes in this country. And it's sick to think, you know, I grew up really like, I don't know how else to explain it. So it wasn't until I got my DNA test, 23andMe, that I found out I have no Jewish in me. I have no Jewish blood. And I'm like 98 or 99% European, 1.7% Coptic Egyptian. And I always grew up just thinking I was just like everybody else, just different color skin. You know, we're just all human beings. We're all like monkeys, really. And we really look at each other, and then you look at monkeys. It's striking similarities. I don't think how people could say, well, you know, maybe our DNA was manipulated by aliens. It's possible that they have amused themselves in such a way to do that, because the aliens that we've come to know as the Greys are quite small, and they're like little weird-looking and small beings. So you'd think that maybe they would want to maybe mix themselves with us, just like maybe back in the day the Germans mixed with Neanderthals, making them extremely strong and tough people. I have something like a 295 score Neanderthal, which is just the right mix to not look like a Neanderthal. But when you have about 495 percentage points in Neanderthal, your brow starts to curve like that, and you look quite different. But you have a type of a strength and testosterone that's just abnormal. And those are where a lot of the elite athletes test in DNA. There's some of us that, there's some human beings that have an incredible in strength It's like twice the normal of a human being. Lance Armstrong was one of those people. They found his heart and his lung was like pumping twice the size of a regular human being. Whether or not he had also manipulated that through steroids and extreme training, you know, it can be, you know, argued, but he also, you know, probably had some type of genetic you know, makeup to that effect. And you know, as far as equality, we're all different, and that's how we are the same. Some folks are born with a hip bone that's slanted a little bit forward and have an advantage for running faster. If you look at the genetic makeup of Usain Bolt, the man is an incredible human being built for speed. I mean, his body, it's just amazing. However, you have other sprinters that don't exactly have the same body. They're more like solid and kind of, they have just like a different kind of build, and they're extremely fast at sprinting as well. And they're usually the champions. And you have a lot of the marathon runners who win hands down, hand over every year from Kenya. And they grow up running from town to town, long distances. And that's been happening for thousands of years. So people evolve different ways. They evolve chasing game. They've evolved rowing boats. They've evolved hopping in and out of river boats with swords and going around different cultures. And in Germany, the Vikings had permeated this kind of Nordic river network well into Iran, to the point where they had developed high-end steel. And so this whole culture in Germany of making steel and fine things, precious things, in a cold climate, with a lot of time to do so, evolved into the European culture as we know it. And I think the Germans are very proud people. And if you look at the history of what happened during World War I, it harks back to an earlier era of the French Revolution and the revolution in this country, and things that have happened where you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And eventually people rise up and will call out the bullshit. It wasn't science. Having a DNA test, back in 1939, was not feasible. People, were tricked into thinking that, if you didn't have blue eyes and you weren't in the master race, that you should be exterminated, that you were causing problems for everybody. And people really believe that because they would, watch these propaganda. And, there's all these artists and filmmakers, Leibovitz, being one of them, not any Leibovitz, Lenny Reichenstahl, is the rock star photographer. But anyway, so you had a lot of, and Goebbels too, you have a lot of these Germans who were making up this fantasy of people who look just like me, and that everybody should look just like me. And I've been to Germany where we all just look the same. And literally, some of them may be a little bit blonder hair, maybe a little taller or shorter, but in general look almost striking like me. And it's even more so when you go to places like Grenoble in the Alps, in the French Alps, or Switzerland. People are extremely mixed. There's no such thing as being like a really pure German until you really you want to look at somebody who's really more Nordic when you go to like Iceland. And I have Icelandic in me. So apparently there was somebody, my ancestors, who went around kicking ass. And I also have a little Korean in me in California. They 60,000 years ago, I looked at these tracer lines, they show that maybe somebody went to California, may have got himself, one of my ancestors may have been that one where they found that had a spearhead in his upper hip bone, in California, but he was from Germany, and probably most likely rode there on horseback most of the way. Who knows? You know, who knows really what's happened throughout history? But in order for us to not to be have Down syndrome and mental retardation and birth defects, our species had a mix. So the first species to leave Africa were people from what we now know as Asia. Their eyes developed a slantiness because they evolved looking towards the east at the sunshine. These people are the first to have left Africa, and then they moved back towards east, mixed with Arabs and Northern Europeans and West Africans, and we evolved to look the way we do because of what we ate and where we lived. But we also mixed a lot more than people think. So the Germans, like Hitler, actually had Jewish blood in them and were quite mixed. Say was Goebbels too, had a lot of Jewish blood in him, and they were quite mixed. And these were actually kind of like these gangster peasant kind of people who were kind of like pussies, you know, kind of like wimps. And then you had these big heroic people, these big scary guys like Hermann Hesse, these big kind of like and Goering, these very upper class, well educated, admired by the German public. Goering to fly the plane, to be these pilots, these aces. They were respected on both sides by the Allies because of the amazement of flying a machine in the air. It was a spectacular thing. Some of these dogfights, and I got to spend time with a lot of these pilots, a lot of these decorated German pilots who got like a little bit of a pass, even though they did like 18 kills by our guys, because they were flying the plane. It was a dogfight. They weren't working in a concentration camp and torturing and exterminating people. They were following orders. They were soldiers flying planes. These were not bad people. These were nice people, and some of that money never left Germany. Gold bars, things, were used to make a business, and so the German economy does quite well. And just like the Russian economy, it has a resource channel of oil and gas and minerals, and established businesses, just like here in America with our oil companies, that the same families that were okay with Hitler, and even in England, in America, still exist today. And it's quite scary how it's managed to infiltrate the Central Intelligence Agency, the FBI, and our government as we know it. Because let's face it, when you have over $285 billion, and you're part of a family, and your family net worth is probably $580 to $1 trillion, you have more influence, and you have more power not being famous and not being in the spotlight, and not making waves, and having someone else say what you want to say. And that's exactly what Donald Trump does. That's exactly what the Russians want to happen in this country, is for some madman who's unstable to dismantle NATO, and and do so in the justification that it's for business, it's for money, it's for the economy. Doesn't that hark back to the Third Reich? And the motherfucker listens to fucking Hitler speeches and shit, it's so funny. It's like, I often wonder, there's such a snobbery in the upper class. A lot of these wealthy people, I've met them, I've worked for them. I had a suit and tie on. It was very polite, it was very professional, very respectful. wouldn't in a million fucking years after getting to know me let me anywhere near their house, let alone their children or their daughters, their equestrian. uh, I don't know. It's funny because when I was a kid, I had some experiences where I fell in love with a beautiful girl. I love her dearly, and her dad. And I can only talk about this because the guy's dead now, and I'm definitely not going to mention the name. Was very nice to his family. Those same hands that would rub, through, his kid's hair. He was very nice, very, charming kind of person. Made a decision, so to be a certain kind of businessman, and that's all I'm going to elaborate on. And when I was a kid, I was like, yeah, well, that doesn't impress me, and little did I realize that money really is evil. Money really can open a Pandora's box of power and influence, and it really can silence your enemies. It really can make you more of a bully, and there are people out there who are in the business of doing very bad things, and you could meet them, and sure, and they might be very, very nice and very generous, but is it time that we as a country put a stop to the income inequality by making these people pay higher taxes? Yes, it is. Do you need to have something to keep a police force in check? Yes, and do you need to have it's like there's a yin and a yang. There's a certain level, I don't want to say of evil, and it's definitely not hate, but there's a certain level of I want to say freedom that we have to allow in this country, because you can't sometimes you just can't trust your own government. You can't trust your own police force. You can't trust your own politician. Just like you can't trust 911 to be there for you all the time. Sometimes you want something done, you gotta do it yourself. Peace, love, and harmony, folks. Thanks for listening. And fuck Nazis.